Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa i roto i tēnei wāhanga o te tau. Ana e rongo nei ngā maanatanga o te rā, e uiti ana o tino te au mirimiri i te pōoki. E waka raru ana i te moe o tino e mihi kau atu ana. Tēnā koutou, kia ora katoa tātou. Kia ora everybody, Jay Wilson here from Te Pai Pai Waho, connecting to you tonight through a range of platforms. And tonight we're going to be talking about online hui, wānanga, and rā wairua. And there are a heap of hui, wānanga, and they're online these days, but I thought I'd just share a few other perspectives because there are still a heap of people who are either anti it or just haven't had the experience, so because it's different, shun it. Ka te ake, e mihi ana kia koutou, o ti rā ki tātou katoa, i roto i tēnei pō. Mai a maranga wakarangono te rangi e tū nei, mai a maranga wakarangono te papea takuto ake nei. Mai i are wakatupu anuku, mai i are wakatupu arangi. E au e ana ki te pai waho e tū nei, te nei te pō, tū mai te pō. Turuturo au iti waka maua kia tīna, hui e, tāi ki e. So kia ora everybody. As I said earlier, going to share a few thoughts on online hui, wānanga, and even rā wairua. And for those that don't know what rā wairua are, I'll cover that in a bit more detail. But basically, they are wānanga or hui and karakia that are connected to prophetic movements usually, like the kingitanga, like ringatu, and other prophetic movements around the country. Hoi anō, let's get into this. So we have become very used to Zui and which are Zoom hui or Teams or all of the other different platforms you might use to connect and hold hui. I think the key thing to note is a couple of points. Church. Number one, anything over an hour and a half, you need to be having dedicated breaks. And if you are going to be having a long hui, you should put some intention at the beginning of the hui so that you make sure that you can hold the course. And the more you put intention into that, it can take you to a really good place, and it can help the hui to flow and identify some of the key points that are required to get you over the line. One of the other points, is you should be limiting the number of hui you have each day, because people just want to fill up their whole calendar with hui, and then they've got to spend hours after their working day to catch up on all the emails and all of the other mahi that's required. And you should also have a decent break between hui. Otherwise, you're being a slut to huis and to other people's time rather than using intention to take you. And I'm saying this from my own experience last lockdown, where I was just saying yes to everything because I didn't need to drive anywhere. And I realized, well, actually, that's not helping me. It's only helping others. That's hui. Wānanga. You'll see a lot of wānanga, and there's some really onto it people who know how to run wānanga online so that you can feel and get a good grasp of things. Use the tools that your platform have. So if you've got breakout rooms and all of that, make sure you've got those. Make sure that you've got someone else continually checking to mute those who don't really know what they're doing. Always set the ground rules from the beginning. but have variation throughout the wānanga, especially if the wānanga is going to be longer than 2 hours. Have variation and make sure any extra tools you're using, you either do some training where it's required prior, or they're simple tools to use. And just make sure that when you're working with people who are a bit more intimidated by technology, that you touch base with them and have others helping them. Otherwise, it can be a real hoha at both ends, both for the facilitator as well as for the participant. And if you break things up, have some good breaks and you stick to those breaks, even if the kōrero is having a good flow to it, it'll help re-energize everybody. Excuse me. And I like to make sure that during the hui itself, you get to go out. Another thing that I've done is I'll only do 2-hour sessions and then have an hour break in between. And then that refreshes everybody, and it gives different ones to connect in either online or by phone for them to bounce off a few more words or a few more ideas following on from the session you just had. And if you're going to do it that way, it's good to have one in the morning, then an hour break, another one in the afternoon, an hour break, another one in the afternoon, hour break, and then one at night. And that will then give you some really good options, tūterangi, and some decent amount of breaks in between. The final thing is rā wairua. And for those that don't know what a rā wairua is, it's a spiritual gathering which are usually associated to prophetic movements, like Parihaka have their rā, the Ringatus have their 12s and other rā, the Pokai is a version of that, and we also have our rā wairua in the prophetic movement that I come from. Last year, we were forced into having one of our rā online in the May last year because the whole country was in lockdown. And all we did is we made it really simple. We did 7 o'clock karakia the night before the rā, where we did a wakato first, and then karakia, then wakamoemiti, kōrero, and it took about 2 hours, and we hung it up, and then we joined up again at 11:30 or 11 o'clock, because we start ours at home from midnight to midnight. So we got in at 11, opened it up again, had some kōrero, and then karakia at midnight, bit more kōrero, closed it off, then gave instructions of when we were all going to have our own hakare in our homes, and then 7 o'clock evening karakia again, and then that karakia went on a bit longer because people had a lot more to share on their experience, as well as them feeling sad because we weren't together, and then again coming together around about 11, probably about 10:30 by that stage, and we had another hour and a half session and closed off at midnight. We then did that again in the October, and just because we were a bit worried about how everything went or was going with COVID. Whereas this year, we had our in person and also had a live stream facility at both marae. And there were definitely some teething problems, and sometimes you couldn't hear people, especially when it's a big warepuni, and also when the internet connection gets a bit tired and is growing tore rather than being clear and crisp. And so there were definitely teething problems, but the essence of it, you were able to feel. And, being in lockdown here in Waikato, we were still able to feel. The other thing we did here in Waikato is that we maintained the rules. And because it's a religious event, we made sure that we stuck to the rules, kept all of the doors open and all of that, had our hui outside, and had our screen and all of that, and did our thing so that we could, for those of us in lockdown, were able to maintain while sticking within the rules and just being together. And so some were able to link from Australia and all of that. And then whenever the internet connection was getting a bit tired, we then just did our own sessions and went from midnight to midnight. But the only difference is, in our case, those of us in lockdown, we just came in at about 10 o'clock in the morning, joined in with the family when we could, had our own hakari, and then joined in again, and then had our own sessions. One thing I did enjoy, though, was having a whiteboard, because you don't have a whiteboard at a rā. The rā is just kōrero and waiata and interpretation of different things, healing when it's required. But I really enjoyed having a whiteboard, because I'm always using a whiteboard in a wānanga, but never in a rā. But because we're in Hamilton and during one of our cup of teas, I've always got a whiteboard in my kitchen. We started using the whiteboard. So those of you that go to rā wairua, suggestion, I don't think I'll take it to the marae because I'm not sure whether we'll be ready for that yet. But it was really cool to have that, and then to go back each time you walk past it to look at and think about what was on the board, just so that you could keep focused on how you grow the idea. In addition to that, the second rā we had was has a hikoi, has a haidinga as part of it, and so they then linked up with us at the different places that they stopped, and all really beautiful and a really cool way to provide connection, as well as for those of us online to still feel the essence, the mana, the tapu, the ihi and the wehi that was coming from out of the warepuni, from both rā. So just some thoughts. Granted, it's nowhere near as good as being there in person, but was still really good and took us to a different place. So just thought I'd share, because to Zoom or not to Zoom, to Teams or not to Teams, or Google Meets, whatever, all of that different stuff, they are tools and we can choose to use them, give them a go, and if it doesn't work, kei te pai. If it does work, ka pai. So ka te ake. I just wanted to share, because I'm mindful that too many people are still really skeptical, but I know the stories from my old people where they've shared, as soon as they got a tape recorder in the 70s, even though that technology had been around for decades, but once tape recorders were affordable, they used them. So I just thought I'd share some wakaaro on this. Final point, out of prison tomorrow, us in the Waikato. So yeah, we'll have a haircut either tomorrow or Thursday, probably Thursday, because tomorrow will be crazy, everybody lining up. But yeah, looking forward to getting out of prison, going home, and e mihi atu ana ki koutou katoa i roto i tēnei pō, tēnā koutou, turuturu o i te whakamaua kia tīna, hui e, tai ki e.